Blessings and welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we're in 1 Kings chapter 15 and then we jump over to 2 Chronicles and we read chapters 13 through 16. A lot of good read today. Again, we're in this kind of this thread that goes through Kings and Chronicles of rebellion, sprinkled in with some good kings that do some great things. But just an example, 1 Kings 15 verse 3, we start off with a father who was king. He passes, his son takes over, and his son just kind of follows the example his father led. Father's an evil king, and the son becomes an evil king. We see a lot of this, but it's not always true. You know, sometimes we'll see the father was a bad, terrible, evil king, and just right off the top of my head, a good example, we'll see Hezekiah later on, and I really can't remember right now what chapter that's in, but it's down the road. But Hezekiah was a really good king. And then he had a son, Manasseh, and Manasseh was the most evil king. So, I mean, you know, you have this back and forth. And I want you to understand it is an individual choice whether you're good or bad. Just because your heritage and your history may not be good, you can turn that around like that and follow God and be good. But you also got to pass it down to your children, because it's really hard for someone who comes up behind you to be good if you're not leading by example. And we see all instances of this back and forth. In chapter 15 verse 3 starts off with an example of an evil king, and his son takes over, and his son is just as evil or more evil than his father was. We see in chapter 15 that there was constant war between Israel and Judah. I mean, they just back and forth. And I had a thought when I was reading this. These are God's children, the 12 tribes of Israel, and they're constantly fighting each other and killing each other. And just, man, it's just a terrible time in their history. But, you know, America, we've had our civil wars where we've killed our brothers and sisters. And humanity, we can't do it on our own. All this points to God and our need for Christ and to give our life to Him, because we're never going to be good enough. We can't be, no matter how hard we try. And these are the lessons that come from this. Jumping into 2 Chronicles chapter 13 verse 6 is a warning to the people of Israel against living in rebellion. And we need to constantly check ourselves whether or not we're living in rebellion. You know, whether it's rebellion to our boss at work or even at home. You know, if our wife or husband says something to us and it makes us angry, and we do little things here and there, and are not, you know, just living the way we should, and just getting away from a rebellion completely, then we really need to think about that and change our, you know, our attitudes basically. Verse 12 is a call to stop fighting and return to God. You know, stop this rebellion and let's get back to the worship of God. Chapter 14 verse 4, King Asa, man, he starts off as a really good king, and you know, it's encouraging after you read a couple of bad kings to read this really good guy comes along, and he's a good king, and he loves the Lord, and he follows the ways of God, and he destroys all the idols and all the places where they worship. But then it's really sad, and it's a good lesson for us that when you get down towards the end in chapter 16 verse 7, you see towards the end of his life he falls away from following God. Solomon was a great king and did a lot of great things, but at the end he fell away from God and he quit worshiping God. We've got to remember, this is not a sprint and we're done and then, you know, the rest of our life we're good. It's a marathon. It's a lifelong journey, and we have to stay in God's word until the day we die. We can't allow ourselves to live, you know, 20 years as a good person and then the last 10, 15, or even 2 years not following God, because we see this example and we want to finish well. So anyway, that's a lot of the stuff I got from First and First Kings and Second Chronicle read that we did today. Tomorrow there's a lot of reading tomorrow, and it's broken up. So we're going to read 1 Kings chapter 15, starting in 25, because we ended in 24 today. And we're going to read 15:25 through chapter 16, all the way to the end. we're going to jump over to 2nd Chronicles, and we're going to read 2nd Chronicles chapter 17, because it fits in between 1 Kings 16 and 17. Then we're going to go back and we're going to read 1 Kings 17. So 2nd Chronicles is kind of shoved in there in between this reading of 1 Kings. But anyway, we'll get some law enforcement takeaways from it, and I really look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow.